The Pacific War was a brutal contest for dominance. It now hurtled toward its most pivotal confrontation. Emboldened by the swift, crushing success at Pearl Harbor, Japan envisioned a decisive strike at Midway. This strategic atoll would serve as the graveyard for America's remaining carrier fleet. It would solidify imperial control over the vast ocean. But unbeknownst to them, the Americans held a hidden advantage. They had cracked the JN-25B code. This was a window into Japanese intentions, disposition, and timing. This vital intelligence offered Admiral Chester Nimitz the chance to set a trap. He would balance audacious risk against overwhelming odds. In the pre-dawn darkness of June 4, 1942, Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance stood on the flag bridge. He was aboard the USS Enterprise. At 0603, the PBY patrol plane message arrived. It cut through the silence. Enemy force at 320 degrees, 150 miles. With the enemy's location confirmed, the moment of truth arrived. Spruance unfurled his maneuvering board. It was starkly blank. It was a canvas for destiny. With a quiet, unshakable resolve, he declared, "Launch the attack." This resolve belied the immense gamble he was taking. 120 fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes would be committed. Every available aircraft would be part of a single decisive strike. Yet, even with critical intelligence, the battlefield was a maelstrom. It was filled with conflicting priorities and tactical miscalculations. On Midway, Lieutenant Colonel Kymes's tactical plan disregarded fighter escort. This was for the island's meager air defenses and its torpedo bombers. He ignored the absolute necessity of this protection. Aboard the USS Hornet, Commander Pete Mitchell grappled with deployment decisions. He made a similar, fateful choice. Pat Mitchell, skipper of the fighter squadron, pleaded for cover for the torpedo planes. Mitchell, however, prioritized dive bomber protection. This decision would send the slow, lumbering torpedo squadrons into the teeth of Japanese defenses. They would be virtually undefended. The tension of these conflicting strategies came to a head. It happened first in the ready room, then over the airwaves. Lieutenant John Waldron was the fiery skipper of Torpedo Squadron 8. He argued heatedly with Commander Ring. Ring led the main dive bomber formation. Their argument was over the optimal course to intercept the Japanese fleet. Waldron was convinced the Japanese would be in a different position than Ring believed. He was unwavering. He delivered a poignant, almost fatalistic speech to his pilots. "I have no doubt that we will be back here by noon. But if we find ourselves alone and outnumbered by the enemy planes on the way into attack," he continued, "we will keep boring in toward the carrier. If there is only one man left," he declared, "I want that man to take his pickle in and get a hit." He even joked darkly about a nice little picnic in the water if they ran out of gas. The Hornet's flight deck hummed with activity at 0714. The air was thick with a palpable anxiety. Plane Captain Bill Tunstall wished pilot Abby Abercrombie luck. He received a hopeful "see you in Kansas City." Radium gunner Bernie Phelps sensed the immense danger ahead. He entrusted his wallet to Tunstall. It was a small, profound gesture. It spoke volumes about the fear and uncertainty. Tex Gay, a torpedo pilot, felt a momentary panic at the short takeoff space. He was jestingly reassured by Whitey Moore. Then, Waldron's voice crackled over the radio at 0816. He declared his conviction about the enemy's location. When Ring ordered him to fly on us, Waldron's defiant, "The hell with you," echoed across the frequencies. It was at 0825. Dive bomber pilots like Ensign Troy Guillory and Ensign Ben Tappan overheard it. Waldron, leading his 15 Devastators, broke formation. He charted an independent, direct course toward the enemy. It was a desperate gamble. It embodied the tension between calculated risk and bold, insubordinate action. Meanwhile, a small detachment of Torpedo 86 Avengers had already lifted off. This included Bert Ernest's plane. They took off from Eastern Island, Midway Atoll, at 0655. They flew northwest. It was a tiny formation venturing into the vast, empty Cobalt Sea. The pilots soon realized the reported distance was incorrect. Then, the world opened up before them. Suddenly, the overwhelming sight of the whole goddamn Japanese Navy appeared. There was a battleship, 2 aircraft carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. It was a phalanx of steel against their 6 tiny planes. Almost immediately, a swarm of too many to count, Zeros descended. Bert Ernest discovered his .30 caliber nose gun was not firing. The Avengers flew headlong into the ambush. The scale of the trap they had flown into was devastatingly clear. The stage was set. America had critical intelligence, but it faced a numerically superior Japanese force. The outcome of the Battle of Midway now hinged on the courage and sacrifice of individual aircrews. The devastating consequences of tactical miscalculations were already beginning to unfold. The vast Pacific, once a theater of Japanese triumph, now awaited its reckoning. Admiral Raymond Spruance had acted on the crucial PBY sighting of the enemy fleet. He had launched every available aircraft. He was committing America's remaining carrier strength to a single audacious strike. But even as the planes clawed into the sky, the inherent chaos of war was already manifesting. Lieutenant Langdon Feebeling commanded the Torpedo 8 detachment from Midway. He made an independent, desperate dash toward the enemy. His 6 Avengers were quickly overwhelmed and decimated. Similarly, Lieutenant Commander John Waldron led the Hornet's Torpedo Squadron 8. He defied direct orders. He charted his own course in a grim, unwavering pursuit of the Japanese carriers. This insubordination was born of conviction. It isolated his squadron. It sent them into the teeth of Japanese defenses. The initial American torpedo attacks were devastatingly costly. Yet, they served a brutal, strategic purpose. As the slow, vulnerable devastators and Avengers pressed their suicidal runs, they became magnets for Japanese Zero fighters. This drew the enemy's air cover away from the carriers. It disrupted their operational tempo. Aboard the USS Hornet, Commander Stanhope Ring led the main dive bomber formation. He offered drinks to his pilots. It was a gesture met with a chilling, deadly silence. The men understood the grim odds. They understood the scale of the sacrifice already unfolding below. Admiral Chuichi Nagumo was unaware of the full scope of the high-altitude threat forming above. He believed the immediate American carrier threat was neutralized by these initial, low-level attacks. He made a fateful decision at 0716. He ordered his bombers to be rearmed with bombs instead of torpedoes. They were already armed for a second strike on Midway. This critical, time-consuming process left his carriers in a state of perilous vulnerability. The Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu had decks jammed with armed, fueled aircraft and exposed ordnance. They were a ticking time bomb waiting for a spark. That spark came from above. American dive bombers had navigated the vast empty ocean. They now screamed down from the heavens. They exploited the Japanese carriers' exposed decks. They unleashed a concentrated fury. This crippled 3 of Japan's most formidable warships in a matter of minutes. Despite frantic Japanese anti-aircraft fire and desperate defense efforts, the precision and sheer weight of the American attack shattered any lingering illusion of Japanese invincibility. It turned the tide of the battle with terrifying swiftness. Yet, the fight was not over. The Hiryu, the last remaining Japanese carrier, managed to escape the initial onslaught. It launched a desperate counterstrike. It inflicted grievous damage upon the USS Yorktown, but the American resolve held. A final, relentless attack on the Hiryu sealed the fate of the remaining Japanese carrier fleet. It sent it to join its sister ships in the deep Pacific abyss. Amidst the maelstrom, one figure emerged from the wreckage. It was George Gay, the sole survivor of Torpedo Squadron 8's initial attack. Floating amidst the debris, submerged for agonizing hours, Gay became a vital eyewitness. His harrowing survival provided a profound personal narrative of the broader conflict. His testimony, raw and immediate, challenged any notion of a clean, decisive victory. It reminded all of the immense human cost beneath the strategic triumph. The near-total annihilation of the Japanese carrier fleet at Midway marked a crucial, irreversible shift in the Pacific War. Japanese expansion was halted. The path for Allied victory, though still long and bloody, was irrevocably forged. The battle unequivocally demonstrated the ascendancy of carrier-based air power. It forever changed naval warfare. But more than tactics or technology, Midway underscored the immense human cost. It revealed the chaotic realities of combat and the raw courage of individuals. It implicitly challenged the myth of perfect battlefield coordination and the perceived invincibility of any fighting force. The intoxicating triumph of Midway had been a fleeting dream. It was a brief respite. The Pacific War then descended into a new, more visceral hell. The focus now shifted to Guadalcanal. This island would become the crucible where the American fighting spirit was truly forged. It marked the beginning of a protracted, brutal struggle for survival on land and sea. In the immediate aftermath of Midway, the euphoria of victory barely masked a bitter taste. Inter-service rivalry festered among the aviators. The celebration, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and the roar of laughter in Waikiki, quickly gave way. It revealed underlying tensions and inflated claims of heroism. This was particularly true from Army Air Forces pilots. Their high-altitude bombing runs had often proved ineffective. This contrasted sharply with the devastating sacrifices of Navy torpedo squadrons. For the decimated Torpedo Squadron 8, the path forward was a relentless regimen of intense training. It was a crucible designed to harden them for the unknown horrors of jungle warfare. This rigorous schedule, though demanding, was a necessary preparation for an immense logistical undertaking. That undertaking was already in motion. It was the strategic imperative to secure Guadalcanal and Tulagi. As VT-8 transferred to the USS Saratoga, pilots received briefings. These painted a grim picture of their destination. It was a 90-mile island of dense, suffocating rainforest. It was rumored to be teeming with thousands of Japanese forces. Their mission was stark. They were to pound the enemy into submission. They were to drive them back into the sea. Even before the invasion began, a botched rehearsal off Coral Island, Fiji, offered a chilling premonition. It foretold the operational chaos to come. Unreliable landing craft and hidden treacherous reefs foreshadowed the myriad challenges that would plague the campaign. It was a stark reminder that the realities of war rarely unfolded as meticulously planned. Then came the decision that would haunt the Marines. Admiral Fletcher, cautious after previous carrier losses, withdrew his crucial air support early. This move left General Vandergrift's forces precariously vulnerable. On the ground, in the first hours of the invasion, Swede Larsson's aggressive pursuit of targets led to a controversial bombing. It appeared to be a native village. This incident left many pilots incensed. They questioned the ethics of their mission. It immediately fractured squadron cohesion. It cast a deep moral shadow over their initial actions. As night fell over Guadalcanal, a Japanese naval force delivered a catastrophic blow. Moving with deadly stealth, it struck at the Battle of Savo Island. It annihilated the Allied escort force. This devastating defeat left the Marines stranded. Their supplies were critically low. They faced the terrifying prospect of a battalion-like surrender. General Vandergrift was enraged by what he viewed as desertion by the Navy. He gathered his shell-shocked officers. Their faces were rain-streaked. He vowed that this would not be another defeat. The Marines would hold. Hope arrived in the form of the Cactus Air Force at Henderson Field. This included elements of VT-8. Their presence, though initially meager, offered the isolated Marines a crucial lifeline. It was a chance to finally hit back against their unseen enemy. But the Japanese were far from broken. Colonel Ichiki's fanatical banzai charge at Alligator Creek erupted. It was the first of many brutal counteroffensives. His seasoned troops, dedicated to the code of Bushido, crashed against the Marine lines. They expected them to break like decadent breeds. Instead, they met disciplined fire and an unyielding will. This shattered the myth of an easy Japanese victory. Guadalcanal swiftly transformed into a pivotal, attritional battleground. The initial American success in securing a mere airfield was immediately jeopardized. It was due to disastrous naval actions and crippling supply shortages. This forced a small, isolated Marine force to forge a new, desperate fighting spirit against overwhelming odds. It set a brutal precedent for the island-hopping campaigns that would define the war to come. This was the crucible where the true nature of the Pacific War would be forged. It was not in grand fleet actions, but in the mud, blood, and unyielding will of men pushed to their absolute limits. The crucible of Guadalcanal was already stained with blood and marked by desperate defenses. It now transformed into a grinding war of attrition. Each Japanese counteroffensive, each relentless push to reclaim Henderson Field, was met with an equally tenacious American resolve. This demanded a continuous, costly stream of resupply and reinforcement. General Vandergrift received daily intelligence on the enemy's growing strength. He ordered General Geiger to launch desperate attacks on Japanese landing areas. It was a grim acknowledgement that every inch of the island would be contested. The Battle of the Eastern Solomons was a brutal naval and air engagement in August. It had demonstrated the growing offensive capabilities of the U.S. Navy. This was even as the USS Enterprise narrowly avoided destruction. Japanese commanders, blinded by inflated claims, missed a chance to press their advantage. But the sea remained a perilous domain. On the last day of August, the USS Saratoga, a vital American carrier, was struck by a Japanese torpedo. The force of the impact crippled her propulsion. It flooded compartments. It forced Admiral Fletcher to order her planes flown off. The Saratoga, her spirit wounded but not broken, limped away for repairs. She left her air squadrons, including Torpedo Squadron 8, without a home. For the men of VT-8, this meant a transfer to Henderson Field. It was a destination that promised no respite. They arrived on September 13th. A brutal heat and humidity immediately enveloped them. The grass field, their new base, was a desolate graveyard of airplane wrecks. Some still exploded in a fireball. It was a stark testament to the relentless air attacks from Rabaul. Their tents, shared with rats, offered little comfort. This was a far cry from the relative, albeit primitive, sanctuary of Espiritu Santo. The scarcity of torpedoes became a chronic problem. This often forced Avengers to carry 400-500-pound bombs. It was a less effective weapon for their primary mission. The fight for Guadalcanal culminated in a series of desperate struggles. None was more pivotal than the Battle of Edson's Ridge. There, Merritt Edson's raiders had repelled a massive Japanese assault on Henderson Field. This was despite the recent loss of the USS Wasp. Yet the Japanese were far from defeated. On October 11th, American naval forces ambushed a Japanese task force. They dealt a significant blow to their resupply efforts. But this temporary reprieve was shattered by the impending storm. Then came the night of October 13th. It was a date etched into the memory of every American on Guadalcanal. A massive Japanese airstrike, a prelude to their final offensive, hammered Henderson Field. But it was the naval bombardment that followed that truly redefined the meaning of terror. Japanese battleships, including the Kongo and Haruna, unleashed a devastating, indiscriminate barrage. 16 14-inch guns, each shell weighing over 1,300 pounds, rained down on American positions. The air filled with the whistle of incoming shells. They severed the tops of palm trees with loud crack-cracks. It transformed the landscape into a maelstrom of destruction. Pilot Bert Ernest had once scoffed at others digging foxholes. He now frantically scrambled for the nearest dugout after rats leaped onto his tentmate's cot. General Vandergrift, unable to retaliate, huddled in his own foxhole. He endured the ear-splitting noise and constant ground tremors. The reek of cordite was overpowering. The sky was a garish orange from explosions. Fred Mears and Bob Rees, squatting nearby, found themselves consumed by nervous, uncontrollably giggling. Others wept uncontrollably. They were driven to hysteria by the sheer psychological strain. The airfield was crippled. Its fuel depots and communication centers were in ruins. All 6 of Torpedo 8's Avengers were destroyed. 30 of 39 Dauntless dive bombers were also lost. 41 men perished, including Major Gordon Bell. He was killed by a direct hit on his dugout. Fires raged across the field. Planes blazed like torches. Flames from aviation gas reached hundreds of feet into the air, a poignant symbol of shattered normalcy. A piece of shrapnel pinned a pillow in Bert Ernest's tent. A shredded page from his letter lay nearby. In the aftermath, the profound psychological impact was evident. Their air power was virtually annihilated. A Japanese ground offensive was imminent. Torpedo 8's commander, Swede Larsen, made a pivotal decision. His pilots and crews, including Aaron Katz, would trade their flight suits for marine fatigues. They would trade their joysticks for rifles. They would join the Marines on the front lines. It was a desperate improvisation born of necessity. But even amidst this devastation, resilience flickered. Swede, along with Chief J.C. Hammond and a skeleton crew, began an audacious feat. They would rebuild a functional Avenger from the wreckage. This laborious process involved scavenging parts from multiple wrecks. It created the Frankenstein Avenger. It was a testament to ingenuity under fire. Work continued in 12-hour shifts, often under artillery barrages. The meticulously planned Japanese offensive was already unraveling. It was led by General Maruyama's Sendai Division. The Maruyama Road, an 18-mile route through dense jungle and treacherous swamps, proved a bitter exaggeration. It delayed troops and heavy artillery. On October 24th, the ground assault on the southern perimeter of Henderson Field began. It was dubbed Bloody Knoll. 5,000 Japanese soldiers hurled themselves against 700 Marines. They also attacked the 31 naval personnel of Torpedo 8. The rain-filled black sky suddenly turned bright with the explosion of flares, mortars, machine guns, and grenades. Under the brief, terrifying blow, hundreds of Japanese charged from the jungle. A mounting roar of massed artillery, tank, and mortar fire preceded them. The fury of one attack would end with a stack of bodies in front of Marine positions. But the next wave would be coming on. Colonel Puller, hunkered in his water-filled foxhole, called for artillery. He declared, "If they get through here tonight, there won't be a tomorrow." Despite initial penetration, the determined American defense ultimately repulsed the assault. It was bolstered by air support and crucial leadership. It left over 1,000 Japanese dead. Elsewhere, the Battle of Santa Cruz had crippled American carrier strength. It sank the USS Hornet and damaged the USS Enterprise. But this came at a devastating cost to experienced Japanese aircrews. It further impacted their long-term capabilities. Admiral Yamamoto was keenly aware of America's industrial capacity. He felt a profound urgency to deliver 30,000 Japanese troops and equipment to Guadalcanal. This led to his next desperate gamble. The naval battle of Guadalcanal in mid-November sealed the fate of the Japanese offensive. It began with desperate close-quarters engagements in the pre-dawn darkness. Japanese battleships Hai and Kirishima moved to bombard Henderson Field. American task force commanders Admiral Norman Scott and Admiral Daniel Callaghan were killed amidst the chaotic melee. Both sides suffered heavy losses in what became known as Iron Bottom Sound. Admiral Abe, commanding the Japanese bombardment force, withdrew his task force after initial tactical gains. His will was apparently sapped. He failed to complete the bombardment of Henderson Field. This critical decision preserved the airfield's defenses. It saved an approaching American troop convoy. The crippled battleship Hai then became a relentless target for American air attacks. It was pounded by multiple waves of patchwork Avengers. Pilots like Captain George Dooley and Swede Larson led these attacks. The battleship, fighting its death struggle, was swiftly sunk. Simultaneously, Admiral Kondo's formidable task force was met by the American battleships USS Washington and USS South Dakota. This task force included the battleship Kirishima. The Washington, commanded by Captain Glenn Davis, engaged the Kirishima at nearly point-blank range. It unleashed its 16-inch guns. It crippled the Japanese battleship by jamming its rudder. Admiral Kondo, in disbelief, was forced to withdraw. The Kirishima was swiftly sunk, but the most devastating blow came against a 23-ship convoy. It included 11 transports crammed with 10,000 Japanese troops and hundreds of tons of equipment. These slow, vulnerable transports became sitting ducks for persistent American air attacks. Dive bombers turned the convoy into flaming infernos. They utterly decimated the reinforcement effort. The sea became a vast expanse of debris, rafts, small boats, and floating wreckage. It was filled with dead and dying soldiers and sailors. Ultimately, only a fraction of the intended supplies and a mere 2,000 dazed, unequipped soldiers reached Guadalcanal. Swede Larson, in an unauthorized final mission, sank a remaining transport. He was fulfilling his vow of vengeance. The failure of the Japanese offensive on Guadalcanal marked a decisive turning point in the Pacific War. It forced Japan into a strategic retreat. It signaled the beginning of the end of their period of expansion. The campaign highlighted the brutal realities of attritional warfare. It showed the immense human cost borne by both sides. It underscored the critical importance of combined arms, logistical support, and the indomitable will of American forces. From the mud-caked foxholes of Bloody Knoll to the decks of their carriers, they refused to yield. The guns of Guadalcanal fell silent for Torpedo Squadron 8, but the echoes of battle reverberated long after their last mission. Decommissioned in December 1942, the squadron's formal end marked not a conclusion. It was a new beginning for its survivors. It was a transition from the crucible of combat to the uncharted territory of individual futures. The spirit, the history, and the tradition of this squadron will never die, Swede Larsson had dictated in its final war diary entry. It was a testament to the bonds forged in unimaginable fire. Yet, the reality for many was a profound reckoning. It involved memory, sacrifice, and the enduring psychological toll of war. The relentless pressure of combat had often pushed men to their breaking point. It revealed the fragile humanity beneath the veneer of military discipline. One chilling incident occurred on Espiritu Santo. Ordnanceman Newton Del Champs, a hot-tempered but gutsy individual, had drawn a .45 caliber pistol on his commanding officer, Swede Larsson. It was for a perceived slight. This laid bare the deep-seated resentment simmering beneath the surface. It was a stark, visceral challenge to the myth of a perfectly disciplined fighting force. It was a moment where the raw frustrations of men pushed to their limits nearly erupted in violence. Squadron members openly voiced support for Del Champs' desperate act. Amidst this landscape of internal discord and personal struggle, official recognition sometimes offered a fleeting sense of validation. 3 days after the Del Champs incident, Lieutenant Smiley Morgan stood before Admiral Chester Nimitz at Pearl Harbor. He received the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism. This was during his August 24th mission against the Japanese cruiser Tone. His citation spoke of terrific fire and a vigorous and determined attack which scored a direct hit. Yet, the journey back to this moment of valor had been anything but glorious. Morgan's return on the old gunboat USS Sacramento was crammed with men. Conditions were barely larger than a garbage scow. He was surrounded by convicted prisoners. This underscored the profound personal hardship that often accompanied even the most celebrated acts of heroism. It was a stark reminder that the path of a warrior was rarely clean or comfortable, even in triumph. The war's long shadow stretched far beyond the battlefields. It shaped the diverse post-war lives of Torpedo 8's veterans. They built families, pursued civilian careers, and sought normalcy. Yet, the conflict's indelible impact remained. Their paths, from the quiet pursuit of peace to the continued demands of military service, subtly challenged a simplistic notion. It was the idea of a singular, monolithic veteran experience. For some, the enduring trauma manifested in quiet reflection. For others, it led to a tireless quest for truth and meaning. Decades later, the true complexities of war began to surface. This included the interplay of courage, error, and deception. Civilian investigator Bowen P. Weishaupt was a trial lawyer. He was driven by a personal connection to a lost Hornet pilot. He embarked on a meticulous 3-year quest. It was to uncover the truth behind the Battle of Midway. His groundbreaking investigation exposed a deliberate official cover-up. It concerned Admiral Mark Pete Mitcher's egregious errors. These errors were in directing the Hornet Air Group. Mitcher, long portrayed as magnificent in official narratives, had in fact made critical, bizarre decisions. These led to the flight to nowhere and immense losses. He actively evaded responsibility for his failures. Weishaupt's discovery of precise navigational coordinates on Ensign Jerry Crawford's short snorter bill directly contradicted official accounts. It offered irrefutable evidence. This meticulous research was ultimately endorsed by Admiral Thomas H. Maurer. He was a high-ranking naval officer. This lent significant weight to this historical correction. It vindicated Weishaupt's relentless pursuit of truth. It finally challenged a narrative of perfect battlefield coordination that had perpetuated historical falsehoods for over 30 years. For the author of this narrative, the journey to reconstruct these abbreviated lives was more than an academic pursuit. It was an almost sacred trust. It was born from the profound inspiration of Herman Wouk's War and Remembrance. It also stemmed from a deep personal connection to the sacrifices made. The difficulty of this task was immense. After 65 years, The trail to reconstructing the abbreviated lives of many men had simply gone cold. Yet the importance of this work remained paramount. It was about honoring their collective sacrifice. It was about ensuring their stories were not forgotten. The enduring memory of squadrons like Torpedo 8 serves as a powerful symbol. It represents American spirit and sacrifice. But it also compels a deeper, more nuanced understanding of history. Their story debunks simplistic myths of heroism and perfect military operations. Instead, it emphasizes the complex interplay of raw courage, devastating error, and deliberate deception. These elements shaped historical understanding, from the internal strife of a squadron pushed to its limits to the decades-long cover-up of command blunders. The legacy of these men forces us to confront the uncomfortable truths of war. It ensures that their profound impact on individual lives and the nation's identity is remembered in all its challenging human complexity.